Act 4 is the shortest in the play, but it has an important role in the structure of the story. Remember that Act 4 is normally when we move past the climax and past the turning point, and things start moving downhill, as it were, toward the resolution at the end of the play. A Midsummer Night's Dream is a comedy. Classically, comedy rather than tragedy meant nothing more than a happy ending. Therefore, Dante's poem, The Divine Comedy, even though it has many horrific scenes of people in hell, is still considered a comedy because it ends happily with Dante going to and seeing heaven. How does a Shakespeare comedy normally end? With a lot of marriages between the characters, sometimes rather implausible marriages where one more man and woman in the play are thrown together just for the sake of a happy ending. And A Midsummer Night's Dream is no different. The play has been structured around Theseus' wait the 4 days until they can get married. There is an implication that all of this has happened during those 4 days. Theseus and Hippolyta, of course, will get married. They've been anticipating it the whole play, and that's how it will end. Also getting married will be Lysander and Hermia, who wanted to all along, via a plot element which is not particularly subtle or successful here in Act 4, and Demetrius and Helena. How does that come about, and why is that the one that doesn't quite work? We'll discuss that later. First, the Titania Bottom story needs to be finished. We start Act 4 with Titania's 4 fairies still doing everything Bottom asks.
Oh, say, sweet love, what thou desirest to eat.
Truly, a peck of provender. I could munch your good dry oats. Methinks I have a great desire to a bottle of hay. Good hay, sweet hay, hath no fellow.
I have a venturous fairy that shall seek the squirrel's hoard and fetch thee new nuts.
I had rather have a handful or 2 of dried peas.
A couple of good jokes here. I like the one where Bottom says he'd like to munch dry oats and have a bottle of hay, sort of combining his bumpkin's nature, wanting a bottle of presumably some kind of alcohol, but it turns into hay because he has a donkey's nature as well. Titania and Bottom, of course, fall asleep. Oberon comes on and he has an interesting speech. He says that now he is pitying her, and he tells Puck that he upbraided her, which means he chided her, he was angry with her, because of the love she was showing Bottom. Well, of course, that makes no sense, since it was meant to be his own revenge against her, to make her fall in love with some other creature, but then, as we had discussed, that never did make much sense. Then, while under the influence of the potion, presumably, so that her whole will is weak, he asks that changeling Indian child of her, and he says, which straight she gave me, and now I have the boy, I will undo this hateful imperfection of her eyes. It really has been solved too easily. Oberon and Titania's relationship has been perhaps the most interesting one of the couples in the play. At the beginning, they really seemed the closest to a real married couple who are together and devoted to each other and yet have conflicts. His first line, beautifully poetic, setting the night nature scene of their world. Ill met by moonlight, proud Titania, to me starts off the rather higher level nature that Oberon and Titania have in the play. But now, for the first of 2 times here in Act 4, things have been solved much too easily. I asked her for the Indian boy we were quarreling about, and she gave him back. So it's all settled.
Now, my Titania, wake you, my sweet queen.
My Oberon, what visions have I seen? Methought I was enamored of an ass.
There lies your love.
Oh, how mine eyes do loathe his visage now.
Silence a while. Robin, take off his head. Titania, music call. Strike more dead than common sleep of all these 5 senses.
But unlike the 4 lovers and Bottom himself, she, as a purveyor of magic in her own right, gets to see that it was true. Oberon shows him to her, "There lies your love." She is, of course, stunned, and as they exit, she asks Oberon to tell her the whole story of how this happened. Presumably, not being a foolish mortal, she will be allowed to find out. Appropriately, as soon as Oberon and Titania have exited, reconciled, we hear the hunting horns of Theseus, and the Athenian characters whom we have not seen since the first scene, Theseus, Hippolyta, and Aegeus, enter. One of Theseus's lines is quite famous. The second one he speaks here: "My hounds are bred out of the Spartan kind, so fluid, so sanded, and their heads are hung with ears that sweep away the morning dew." A tribute to his hunting dogs, which is very poetic. But the main thing that they are here for, it seems to me, is to reestablish a sense of order, of normal daytime life, and not coincidentally to wake the four lovers up. Aegeus recognizes his daughter there, Lysander, Demetrius, and Helena, and says, hardly giving a hint of the strange events that he knows nothing of, "I wonder of their being here together." I mentioned before that Act 4, as the falling action, it includes a lot of waking up. Both figuratively, you might say, and literally. Started with Titania. Now the four lovers are woken up, and essentially what they say is that they don't really know what happened. It seems vaguely and appropriately like a dream. Demetrius says near their exit, "It seems to me that we yet sleep, we dream." They can hardly figure out what's happened. But there's one very important thing. Demetrius is still in love with Helena. As I said in the last video, it is significant that Puck took the love potion power off Lysander, that is, he gave him the antidote. He did not give the antidote to Demetrius. Now, this is what Oberon had wanted in the first place. He wanted Demetrius to love Helena. Because Shakespeare wants a happy ending, he allows this situation to remain. It's not really a satisfying one. Demetrius is still under the influence of the love potion. Things have not been put right, and it doesn't fit as far as the way the plot should go. If things move more and more into madness and magic, characters falling in love with the wrong people, Bottom's head being turned into a donkey's head, then so should Bottom being turned back, which is going to happen. Lysander loving Hermia again, Titania not loving Bottom and being reconciled with Oberon, all those things should happen. But Demetrius should love Helena. He didn't. Once again, the ephemeral and rather unreal nature of what is called love in this play is shown. The really strange thing is that Helena, one of the stronger and more individual characters in this play, I think, does not hold on to her integrity the way she was doing in Acts 2 and 3. She had been saying that Demetrius was making fun of her, as she felt Lysander was. Now she just accepts it. "So you did love me like I always wanted. Okay." It shows how little sense the love potion really makes, and I'll talk about that point before I conclude this particular video. The act concludes with Bottom waking up and thinking that everything that happened to him was a dream. Then he decides he's going to have Quince write about this dream. And this can be delivered in a rather funny way. "It shall be called," what interesting name will he give it? "Bottom's Dream." Why? Because it hath no bottom. So his rather obvious humorous name ends up having an additional meaning now that there seems no depth too deep for the strange meaning of the experience that he had. In the brief scene 2, Quince and Snout and Flute and Starveling are very happy to see Bottom come back. Oh, most courageous day! Oh, most happy hour! He is himself again, and they will be able to put on the play. But there are a couple of problems left in Act 4. Why did Aegeus give in? Theseus simply told him to. Theseus says, "Aegeus, I will overbear your will." No reason given. It's just we had a difficult conflict at the beginning of this play. Aegeus was trying to force his daughter to marry someone she didn't want to, so Theseus, as the man in power, will now just say, "You know what? I'm telling you, you can't do it. She can marry Lysander." This is what was called deus ex machina in Greek plays, and is still called by that term, where when the playwright couldn't think of any way to solve the problem that he'd gotten his hero into, he'd have one of the Greek gods come. Jove or somebody would suddenly come along and rescue him. There's no logical reason proceeding out of the characters. It's just necessary, once again, to have the happy ending. Things are about to be wrapped up pretty well in the weaving that Shakespeare's been doing since the first few scenes is about to go quite nicely in Act 5, as I will describe in the last video. But the love potion has still left some questions. What was this all about? Why is it all right to Shakespeare that Demetrius and Helena will be brought together by something artificial? Was it the lover's fault, Lysander and Demetrius? We'll put Titania aside, for as I said, it's never really plausible that she, a fairy, falls victim to the same magical influence as the mortals do. But Lysander and Demetrius, what did they really do? What were they surrendering to? A lot of times I've had students say, it's not Lysander and Demetrius' fault the way they behave. They were under the influence of the love potion. What could they do? But that seems entirely too close to the moral viewpoints of our modern day. This is a standard comment. It wasn't his, her fault. She was made this way. We take away moral responsibility, as it is put so strongly in the New Testament, for example, with St. Paul's powerful words about how evil we all are, and he includes himself. Instead, what we have now is, it started, I think, with alcoholism. Alcoholism is a disease that person can do nothing about getting drunk to that extent. Well, of course, people can work at it with God's help and the help of loved ones and get over it. Drug addiction then becomes the same thing. Smoking cigarettes does. Lately, I've even seen eating too much put that way. Now, gluttony is supposedly a gene and we can't do anything about it. Of course, homosexuality is constantly explained away now as the way God actually made the people. Yes, Lysander and Demetrius are under the influence of magic. But how could Shakespeare have made this deeper? And it probably would have been deeper in one of his darker, later comedies, like All's Well That Ends Well or Twelfth Night. They could have fought against it. We've seen that. Stories about magic very often have that. Look at my favorite, The Lord of the Rings. The ring does cast a spell. It does make people desire it. It does threaten to make them evil and allied with the dark powers. Gollum, of course, gives way to that and becomes the horrible creature, a little too cute in the movies. In the book, the horrible creature he is. But the other characters who are tempted, Frodo, Sam, Galadriel, Aragorn, it goes on and on. Boromir, briefly, although he gets over it. The other characters who are tempted fight it. Wouldn't we have had a deeper play if we'd seen Lysander and Demetrius struggling against the influence of the magic, realizing that they really did love Hermia underneath? That's what actually goes on, of course, in the fight for our souls that happens every day with God and the devil struggling for us. It is a very funny play. It's justifiably popular. But I think the later Shakespeare, not the Shakespeare of A Midsummer Night's Dream, would have found something a little more indicative of the real depth of human character to put into the actions of his characters in this play.